He crushed her bicycle like it was trash, right in the middle of the school parking lot, because in his mind, a poor black girl didn't deserve anything better. He laughed, the crowd laughed, and for 5 minutes the world pretended her pain was entertainment. But fate has a wicked sense of timing, because 5 minutes later, his father's golden boy reputation went up in flames, literally, when her mother stepped out of her SUV and set his precious car on fire. The morning rush at Northwood High always sounded like chaos dipped in sunshine, laughter bouncing off brick walls, backpacks thudding against students' sides, sneakers skidding across the pavement. But the moment Imani Reeves pedaled her worn-down blue bicycle through the front gate, that sound shifted, not into silence. Silence would have been kinder. It shifted into something colder, sharper, an awareness that sliced straight through her chest. Heads turned. First one, then 5, then too many to count. 16 years old, dark-skinned, thin from working late shifts at the diner, Imani kept her chin up even as her stomach tightened. She had crossed this gate hundreds of times, but today felt different. The air itself seemed to brace against her presence. That was when Chase Harrington stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a varsity jacket he didn't earn but wore like a crown. Chase blocked the pathway with a smirk stretching lazily across his face. Behind him, the Maple Queens, their hair curled, lip gloss shining, phones already raised, formed a neat semicircle, like they'd rehearsed this moment. "Well, well," Chase drawled, eyes dragging from the peeling paint of Imani's bicycle to the patches on her worn jeans. "Look who thinks she belongs on the same road as us." Imani pressed her lips together. "Excuse me," she said quietly, trying to steer around him. But Chase shifted, bumping his knee intentionally into her front wheel. The tire jerked sideways. Imani's hands slipped from the handlebars. Her body hit the ground with a dull thud that rippled through the watching crowd. Phones rose higher. A few girls gasped, not in concern, but in excitement. Someone whispered, "Record it, record it. This is gold." Imani swallowed hard, pushing herself up. Gravel clung to her palms. Her elbows stung. Her breath shook, but she refused to let it break. Chase crouched slightly, lowering his face to her level, voice dropping into a poisonous whisper meant to humiliate, not to be heard. "You want to ride next to the rich kids? You think that rust bucket makes you equal to us?" He flicked the bicycle frame with 2 fingers as if testing how cheaply built it was. "I said move," Imani murmured, steadying her shaking hands on the handlebars, though her fingers trembled too hard to grip. "Oh, she doesn't get it," one of the Maple Queens laughed. "She thinks she's allowed to talk back." Chase straightened, spreading his arms dramatically. "Tell you what, Reeves, say you're sorry." Imani blinked. "For what?" "For daring to breathe the same air," he snapped. "For pretending you don't know your place." The crowd let out a collective noise, half amusement, half hunger for more. Imani's throat tightened. Shame pooled hot behind her eyes, but she forced it down. She had survived worse. She could survive this. But Chase wasn't finished. He placed one foot on her fallen bicycle and pressed down just enough for metal to creak. Imani froze. "Say it," he demanded. Her voice buckled but didn't break. "No." A beat passed. Chase's smirk sharpened. Then that, his foot pressed harder, the frame groaning, was just the warm-up. He leaned close, letting his words slice into her. "That's only the beginning, isn't it?" Behind him the Maple Queens laughed, delighted. The crowd murmured, leaning closer, hungry for more drama, more cruelty, anything to fill the emptiness of their morning. Imani's breath came fast, shallow. She didn't know what was coming next. She only knew Chase's eyes held a promise, not of mercy, but of escalation, and he always kept his promises. Imani had no way of knowing that, within minutes, the humiliation she feared would turn into something far worse, something that would tear across the entire schoolyard in front of everyone. The walkway leading from the school gate to the main building was usually loud, students shouting across clusters of friends, lockers slamming open, sneakers dragging across the cracked pavement. But today, all that noise bent around one scene. Imani Reeves, still trying to steady herself beside her fallen bicycle. She bent down to lift it, hoping the incident would end there. It didn't. Chase Harrington stepped forward again, his shadow swallowing what little courage she had left. With a sharp, deliberate swing of his leg, he kicked the bike, the impact echoing across the walkway like a gunshot. Metal groaned, the front wheel warped inward. The chain snapped free and clattered onto the pavement. The Maple Queens gasped in unison, not out of shock, but excitement. "Oh my God, get this on live stream," one of them squealed. Phones shot upward instantly. A red recording dot blinked. The humiliation became public property. Imani dropped to her knees, scrambling to gather the spilled contents of her backpack. A cracked water bottle, a few worksheets, a half-empty box of granola bars she saved for work shifts. Her fingers trembled too violently to grab anything properly. Each time she reached for an item, someone kicked it just out of reach. "Look at her," a Maple Queen giggled. "She's like a raccoon digging through trash." Imani's chest tightened, breaths coming in quick, shaky bursts. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, trying to stop the burning behind them, but the laughter kept coming, sharp and merciless, drilling itself into her spine. Then footsteps approached. For a split second, hope sparked in her chest. A teacher, Cole Landon, known for preaching kindness during assemblies, walked straight toward the scene, toward Imani, toward Chase, toward the ruined bike. Imani lifted her head, eyes pleading. Chase stiffened slightly. For a moment it felt like the universe might finally pick a side. But when Miss Landon saw Chase's face, saw the smug smirk, the varsity jacket, the unmistakable Harrington bloodline, her expression shifted. The tension in her shoulders loosened. Her steps slowed, then veered away entirely. She pretended to fix her hair, glanced at the sky, then turned her body sharply in the opposite direction, walking off as if she hadn't seen a thing. Not one word, not one question, not 1 ounce of humanity. The Maple Queens burst into laughter. "Even teachers don't care about her," one whispered into the live stream. "This is priceless." Imani's heart crumpled. Her hands froze on the ground. The reality sank deeper than any insult. She wasn't just alone. She was invisible to the very people meant to protect her. But someone else was watching. Farther down the walkway, leaning against a shaded pillar, stood Lucas Myers, quiet, unassuming, often overlooked. His face didn't show amusement. It showed something colder, something calculating. While everyone else recorded for entertainment, Lucas reached slowly into his hoodie pocket and pressed a button on his phone. A soft beep. Recording started. Lucas wasn't filming for fun. He was recording everything for reasons nobody in that crowd could guess. Back at the scene, Chase wasn't done admiring his damage. He nudged the twisted bicycle frame with his foot, letting out a satisfied exhale. "You should thank me," he said. "At least now that trash won't embarrass you any further." Imani's vision blurred as tears welled. Her bicycle, her only way to get to school, to her part-time job, to anywhere, lay crooked and broken on the pavement, a lifeline severed. She lifted her gaze to Chase, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Chase shrugged casually, flashing a cruel grin at the cameras aimed at him. "Honestly, because I'm bored." He stepped back, rolling his shoulders as if warming up. "And I'm not done yet. We need a little entertainment before class, don't we?" The Maple Queens cheered. Imani's stomach dropped. Chase was just getting started, and the next few minutes would be far worse than anything she had endured so far. The courtyard at Northwood High was the beating heart of the campus, a wide-open plaza where hundreds of students crossed paths every morning. Today, it felt like an arena, a coliseum, a place where blood, figurative or emotional, was spilled for sport, and Imani Reeves stood in the dead center of it. Chase Harrington shoved her broken bicycle forward with one hard kick. The twisted frame scraped across the concrete, drawing every pair of eyes to it. The metal screech echoed sharply, slicing through morning chatter, until the only sound left was anticipation. "There she is!" Chase shouted, projecting his voice like an entertainer on a stage. "The school charity case, riding trash, because she is trash." A wave of laughter rolled across the courtyard. Imani froze, her breath trapped somewhere too deep to reach. She felt small, smaller than the cracked tiles beneath her feet, smaller than the shattered chain from her bike, now glinting under the sun. Chase wasn't done. He walked circles around her, making sure everyone got a clear view. "You know what's funny?" he continued loudly. "She still shows up every day like she belongs here. Isn't that adorable?" Phones rose into the air, rows and rows of them, like a forest of black mirrors. They captured everything: her trembling hands, her red eyes, the humiliation unfolding second by second. Imani could hear the whispers spreading like wildfire. "Is she crying? Zoom in. Bro, send me the video." Her vision wavered. Her legs felt like they might give out. She wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the ground, to vanish into a place where no one could reach her or ridicule her. But the crowd kept closing in. Chase leaned closer, voice dropping into a venomous hiss meant to cut straight through her. "Say something, Reeves. Come on. We're all waiting. Or do you only know how to beg for tips at that diner you work at?" Imani's breath cracked. A chorus of laughter exploded behind her. Her worst fears weren't happening. They were evolving, growing teeth. Still, Chase pushed her bicycle again, this time shoving it into the very center of the courtyard. He wanted maximum visibility, maximum humiliation. He wanted her pain to be morning entertainment. "Let everyone see what happens when someone pretends they're equal," he announced. "Let's make sure nobody forgets this." The Maple Queens twirled, capturing every angle. Some students streamed it live, shouting updates into their phones like reporters covering breaking news. But then, without anyone realizing, one stream broke the barrier. A live stream of Imani's humiliation, originally shared among students, was reshared by someone into Northwood Parents Network, a private forum of concerned and very vocal parents, including one member who was already awake, already dressed for work, and already driving down the freeway. Aaliyah Reeves. While Imani stood in the courtyard trying not to collapse, 2 miles away her mother's phone buzzed with a notification. New post in Northwood Parents Network. "Your daughter is being bullied," and beneath it, a live-stream thumbnail of her child surrounded by hundreds of laughing students. Inside the car, Aaliyah's heartbeat tripped violently. She clicked the notification. The screen expanded. Imani's tear-streaked face filled the display. She saw Chase. She saw the broken bike. She saw her daughter shaking while others pointed and laughed. Aaliyah's grip on the steering wheel tightened until her knuckles went white. Her breath shortened. Her vision sharpened into a tunnel of rage she hadn't felt since the years she served as a firefighter, the years she watched people hurt, ignored, overlooked by those who had the power to help. Not her daughter. Not today. In a single motion, she slammed her foot onto the brake. Tires screeched across asphalt. The car fishtailed slightly, but steadied. Aaliyah whipped the wheel around, making a sharp, illegal U-turn without hesitation. Traffic honked behind her, but she didn't hear it. Her pulse drowned out the world. Fire was building inside her. And it was only getting hotter. As she sped back toward Northwood High, Aaliyah Reeves carried something more dangerous than anger. She carried purpose, and soon the entire school would feel the heat of it. The walkway spilled into a narrow vehicle lane beside the student parking lot, an area usually busy with late arrivals, skateboarders weaving between cars, and seniors blasting music from open windows. But right now, every sound faded behind one cruel rhythm, metal bending under Chase Harrington's foot. Imani couldn't look away. Each stomp felt like a punch to her chest. Chase pressed his sneaker onto the already warped frame of her bicycle and pushed down with deliberate force. Crunch. The sound splintered the air. Students jolted with excitement, some covering their mouths dramatically, others cheering like it was halftime entertainment. "Break it! Break it!" someone yelled. Chase grinned, feeding on their attention. "Relax," he said, voice dripping arrogance. "I'm just helping her upgrade. Can't have her riding this prehistoric trash, right?" He twisted his heel. The metal frame finally snapped, collapsing inward. A wave of cheers rolled through the crowd. Imani choked on a sob. She clutched her hands to her mouth as tears blurred her vision. Her chest heaved, not just from grief, but from a kind of helplessness that felt suffocating, crushing, absolute. She tried to speak, tried to say please, but the word got stuck in her throat. Not one student stepped forward. Not one voice told Chase to stop. Not one person asked if she was okay. Dozens watched, hundreds recorded. It was violence dressed as entertainment. A few feet away, Lucas Myers hovered at the edge of the circle. His phone was still recording, audio catching every stomp, every insult, every shaky breath Imani took. He looked torn, his jaw clenched, his eyes flicking from Chase to Imani to the crowd. Finally, his instincts pushed him forward. "Hey," Lucas stepped in. "Enough. Seriously, just stop." Before he could finish, a large hand slammed into his shoulder. A tall, broad-shouldered senior, one of Chase's friends, shoved Lucas backward so hard he stumbled into a parked motorcycle. "Back off, nerd," the senior growled. Lucas steadied himself, breath ragged, eyes burning with frustration. "She didn't do anything. You guys are insane." The senior took one threatening step closer. "Touch him," Chase warned, "and I'll ruin your life too." The crowd erupted in nervous laughter at the word ruin, because everyone knew Chase had the power to do it. Money, influence, his father. His last name carried weight heavier than truth. Lucas froze. Imani sat on the ground beside the crushed remains of her bicycle, shoulders shaking. She didn't even try to pick it up this time. There was nothing to save. Chase leaned in, tilting her chin upward with one finger, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Look at you," he sneered. "Trash belongs with trash. Even your transport knows it." Imani flinched. His words sliced deeper than any kick to her bike. Somewhere behind the crowd, a few students hesitated, exchanging uneasy looks. But hesitation wasn't the same as courage. No one dared interfere. And then a sound tore through the chaos. A screech, tires burning rubber, sharp, sudden, violent. Students turned their heads toward the main driveway. Down the lane, a dark SUV swung into view, skidding slightly as it jolted to a stop. Its engine growled, restless, urgent, familiar. Imani's breath caught. Her spine stiffened. Her heart twisted painfully inside her chest because she knew that vehicle. She knew that sound. She knew the way it tilted when braking too hard. It was her mother's SUV. The doors were still shut, windows tinted, but the message was unmistakable. Someone wasn't arriving to watch. Someone was arriving to end this. Imani lifted her tear-streaked face toward the SUV, hope and fear tangling violently inside her. Someone was coming, not with a camera, not with cruelty, but with a fury powerful enough to change everything that happened next. The dark SUV door swung open with a force that made several students flinch. Aaliyah Reeves stepped out, heels scraping against the pavement, her breath sharp and uneven. She had left home 10 minutes earlier expecting a normal day, a normal shift, a normal drive. But nothing could have prepared her for the sight in front of her now. Her daughter, her baby, was kneeling beside a bicycle that looked more like debris than transportation. The front wheel twisted inward, the frame cracked, the chains scattered across the pavement like shattered bones. And Imani herself. Imani was trembling. Tears streaked down her cheeks. Her hands hovered uselessly over the ruins of the bike. Aaliyah's heartbeat stuttered. Her eyes darted from Imani to the crowd, And finally to Chase Harrington, still smirking, still basking in the attention like humiliation was a sport he excelled at. It took exactly one breath for Aaliyah's expression to shift, from confusion to realization to a fury so deep it made the air around her vibrate. Chase gave a mocking whistle. "Look who showed up," he said loudly. "What happened, ma'am? Got a call to come pick up your daughter's trash?" A ripple of laughter passed through the students, but Aaliyah didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't even look at the crowd. Her gaze was locked on Chase with a precision that came from years of entering burning buildings, reading danger, calculating risk, knowing exactly where the heat was coming from. She stepped forward. One step, two, three. The crowd parted instinctively, like they sensed that something primal was approaching. "Hey, slow down, lady," Chase said with a laugh, but his voice cracked just enough to betray uncertainty. Aaliyah stopped only inches from him. Her voice was calm, far too calm. "Did you do this?" Chase shrugged, flashing a grin. "Yeah, and what? Want me to break something else?" Some of the Maple Queens giggled, but the sound died quickly when Aaliyah's eyes cut toward them, sharp, cold, assessing. She turned back to Chase. "You hurt her." It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Chase straightened his jacket, puffing his chest as if to reclaim dominance. "Relax. It's just a bike. She'll live." Aaliyah's jaw tightened. That wasn't just a bike. That was how she gets to school, how she gets to work, how she survives. Chase rolled his eyes. "Not my problem." Maybe she should have thought about that before. He didn't finish, because Aaliyah stepped even closer, and the temperature around them seemed to drop. The entire group of bullies went silent. Imani, still kneeling behind her mother, whispered shakily, "Mom, please, don't." But Aaliyah wasn't hearing anything except her daughter's sobs echoing in her skull. Then something glinted on the ground near Chase's shoe, a small metal object, silver, familiar. Aaliyah recognized it instantly. A car key, with a logo of a luxury brand engraved on it. Her eyes flicked toward the student parking lot. A sleek white sports car gleamed a few meters away, polished so perfectly it reflected the sunlight like a blade. Chase followed her gaze and smirked. "Yeah, that's mine. Daddy bought it." Aaliyah didn't smile, didn't comment, didn't show a single sign of what she was thinking, but something in her shifted, something deliberate, something dangerous. Imani sensed it before anyone else. Her breath caught, her hands curled into fists. Mom, don't do anything stupid," she whispered, terror creeping into her voice. But Aaliyah wasn't stupid. She was furious, and fury in her hands was far more dangerous than stupidity. Her eyes lifted slowly, locking onto Chase with a clarity that felt like flame focusing through glass. Imani's whisper trembled through the air. "Mom, please, don't do something you can't take back." But the wildfire inside Aaliyah Reeves had already ignited, far beyond the reach of reason, and far too powerful to extinguish. The crowd trailed behind Aaliyah like a living shadow as she walked, slow, steady, unforgiving, across the student parking lot. Each step echoed with purpose. Chase Harrington followed at a distance, shouting threats, insults, and panicked commands, but none of it touched her. Her focus was fixed on one target, the white sports car gleaming beneath the morning sun. Students circled around in a wide arc, phones raised high, live streams exploding with comments. Even the air felt charged, as if the entire school held its breath. Aaliyah reached the car. She didn't hesitate. She marched to the back of her SUV, flipped open the trunk, and pulled out a heavy silver canister, one used in fire inspections, sturdy and industrial, with faded warning labels wrapped around the metal. The students fell silent. Chase froze. Hey, don't touch my car." Aaliyah didn't blink. Her movements were methodical, frighteningly calm. She twisted the cap with practiced hands, hands that had once handled hoses, axes, extinguishers, and burning beams. She knew fire better than anyone here. She knew how to fight it. She also knew how to start it. "What the hell is that?" someone whispered from the crowd. "I don't know. But she looks like she knows exactly what she's doing." A security guard finally broke through the circle of students. "Ma'am, stop. Step away from the vehicle." But even he didn't dare get too close, because there was something about Aaliyah, something in the way she stood, that made people keep their distance. Her silence was louder than their shouting. Her rage was an atmosphere. Chase pointed at her wildly. "Get her away from my car. That's a felony. Do your job." The security guard called out again, voice wobbling. "Ma'am, please, put the container down." But Aaliyah only tilted the canister, and then she poured. A stream of liquid splashed across the hood of the sports car, thin at first, then spreading, coating the surface in a shimmering, dangerous sheen. Students gasped. Chase lunged forward, only to stop dead when Aaliyah's eyes snapped toward him, two burning coals warning him to step back. He obeyed. "Are you insane?" Chase shouted, voice cracking. "That's my car. My father bought that for—" Aaliyah reached into her pocket. Slowly, deliberately, the movement sent a ripple of fear through the crowd. She pulled out a lighter, small, metal, worn from years of use, a firefighter's habit, something she always carried without thinking. But now she was thinking, very clearly. "No," the security guard whispered. Don't do that." Aaliyah flicked the lighter. Click, a tiny flame appeared. Chase screamed, "Stop! Get away from it!" Aaliyah lowered the flame toward the hood, a moment of stillness, a heartbeat suspended. Then, boom! A burst of fire erupted across the surface of the car, racing in bright orange streaks, climbing upward in a violent bloom. Heat washed over the crowd, forcing students to step back as shrieks filled the parking lot. "Oh my God! It's really burning! Is she crazy? Record this! Record everything!" The fire swallowed the hood, crawled up the windshield, and burst through the air in a crackling roar. Smoke curled upward into the sky like a furious signal flare. Chase stumbled backward, eyes wide with horror. My car, do something!" But no one moved. No one dared. Aaliyah didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't step away from the flames she had created. She stared at the burning car with the same expression a surgeon might use when removing a tumor, cold, precise, necessary. Behind her, Imani stared in terror and awe, tears drying on her cheeks. A security camera mounted on the corner of the building rotated silently, recording every second. Not just the ignition of the fire, but the entire bullying incident leading up to it. Chase's kicks, his insults, the destruction of the bicycle. Truth was being documented. From beginning to end, Chase looked at the inferno consuming his car. Aaliyah looked at Chase. Her voice was low, controlled, a blade wrapped in velvet. "This price," she said, "is still cheap compared to the tears of my daughter." The words hit harder than the fire. And as the flames roared higher, one thing became clear. Northwood wasn't just witnessing a moment. It was witnessing the spark that would divide an entire town. The atmosphere inside Principal Bolton's office felt nothing like the chaos outside. Here, everything was polished and quiet. Mahogany desk, framed awards, soft lighting. But underneath the surface, tension simmered like a shaken soda bottle waiting to explode. Principal Bolton stood at the center of it all, rubbing the bridge of his nose with the exhaustion of a man who wished he had called in sick. Across from him sat George Harrington, chairman of the school board and father of Chase. His immaculate suit and cold expression announced one truth: he didn't come here to negotiate. Beside him sat Chase, still pale from the sight of his burning car, hand shaking violently, though he tried to hide it. On the opposite side of the room, Aaliyah Reeves and Imani faced them, mother and daughter, still marked by the morning's violence. Aaliyah's clothes smelled faintly of smoke. Imani's eyes were swollen from crying. The contrast between the two families could not have been starker. Principal Bolton cleared his throat. We have reviewed the situation. No need to dress it up, George interrupted. This is simple. Your student, he jabbed a finger toward Aaliyah, committed arson on school property, and her daughter is disruptive to the school environment. Both should be expelled and prosecuted immediately. Imani flinched. Chase leaned back smugly, as if awaiting applause. Yeah, I want charges pressed. My car could have... Aaliyah cut him off with a glare sharp enough to silence him. But Bolton, sweating under pressure, continued, Mrs. Reeves, your actions were undeniably dangerous. The school board is recommending temporary arrest and expulsion procedures. Aaliyah's voice sliced through the room. Show me where in your policy manual it says you can assault a child emotionally, physically, and publicly, and walk away without consequences. George scoffed. Your daughter's behavior is irrelevant. No, Aaliyah snapped. What's irrelevant is your belief that your son is above basic decency. Chase's face reddened. Your kid deserved it. She thinks she's special. Imani's breath hitched, but Aaliyah stepped forward like a shield. You don't get to speak to her again. Bolton tried to regain control. Everyone, please. This is a serious situation. Mrs. Reeves, regardless of what happened beforehand, you set a vehicle on fire, and we have documentation of what happened beforehand, Aaliyah said coolly. She unfolded her phone and tapped the screen. A wave of sound filled the room, Chase yelling slurs, metal crunching, Imani crying, students laughing, and finally, the roar of flames, the viral live stream. Bolton's eyebrows shot upward. This is already online? Aaliyah's tone was ice. Thousands have seen it. Hundreds of parents, reporters, advocacy groups. George harumphed. Social media hysteria doesn't change facts. She committed a felony. No, Aaliyah said, taking a step closer to Bolton. It changes everything. Because now the public sees exactly what your school allows under your leadership. Bolton swallowed. The video was damning. Not just because of Chase, but because of the institutional neglect it showed. No staff intervened. Students encouraged harassment. The environment was toxic, and now the world was watching. Then, Principal Bolton's computer chimed. A new email. Sender. Anonymous subject. Full footage. Bolton hesitated before clicking it open. The message contained only one line. Here is the complete version, including the part where the teacher walks away. A video file was attached. Bolton's face drained of color. His hand shook as he clicked play. The room fell silent as the footage showed Chase destroying the bike, Imani crying, the entire crowd watching, and, most damning, Landon glancing at the scene and deliberately walking away. George stiffened. Chase blanched. Bolton whispered, "Oh, my God." Aaliyah folded her arms. Your problem just got bigger than me. Imani looked between the adults, realizing for the first time that the fire wasn't the real explosion. This scandal was. Principal Bolton stared at the screen, sweat beading on his forehead, as he whispered, Do you know what this means for the school? They all did. Northwood High was no longer facing a single fire in the parking lot, but a blaze that would scorch its reputation, its leadership, and its future. The parent assembly room at Northwood High had never been this full. Rows of chairs overflowed. Parents lined the walls, whispering sharply, clutching phones that still replayed the viral live stream. The air vibrated with anger, a collective energy ready to ignite. At the front of the room stood Principal Bolton, flanked by members of the administration. His normally commanding voice wavered as he tried to open the meeting. Everyone, please, let's maintain order. We called this gathering to address a serious incident. Serious? A parent barked. That video shows a child being terrorized. A ripple of agreement surged through the room. Aaliyah Reeves sat near the front, jaw tightened, arms crossed protectively. Imani sat beside her, trying to shrink into herself as parents whispered her name. Across the aisle, George Harrington and his son, Chase, sat rigidly, trying and failing to mask the tension tightening their posture. Principal Bolton cleared his throat. "We have reviewed footage submitted anonymously and— You mean the footage proving your staff ignored blatant bullying?" Another parent snapped. Bolton swallowed. "Yes, that footage." Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the projector lit up. The full video played. The room watched. Landon glance at the scene and choose to walk away. Chase kicking the bike. Chase doing it again. Chase taunting Imani with racial and economic slurs. The Maple Queens laughing, filming, encouraging. And a final reveal. Screenshots of their group chat leaked anonymously, where they mocked Imani repeatedly, calling her charity case, roach, and school pet. A parent stood up abruptly. "Unbelievable," another added. "This wasn't a one-time incident. This was targeted." Bolton tried to intervene. "We acknowledge the severity." "No," a woman shouted. "You ignored the severity." Shouts erupted. The room dissolved into uproar. A man shouted over the noise, "Why wasn't this reported earlier? Why didn't teachers intervene?" Aaliyah's voice cut through the chaos, calm but razor-sharp, "Because they didn't want to cross the Harrington family." All eyes turned to George and Chase. George straightened his suit. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Kids exaggerate." A dozen voices rose at once. "That teacher walked away. Where was school security?" "My child saw this happening." "Fix your system before blaming the victim." The room was turning into a storm, one that no administrator could contain. Then the twist came. A woman in the third row, a mother with tired eyes, slowly stood up. She held onto her purse strap like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "My son," she began softly, "was bullied by Chase last year." A hush fell. She continued, voice trembling. "My boy came home with bruises. He stopped wanting to go to school. When we reported it, the school told us Chase was a good kid and that it was a misunderstanding." They did nothing. Gasps erupted. More parents stood up. "My daughter, too. He shoved my son into lockers. He threatened my nephew. He stole from my child's backpack." One after another, confession after confession. A flood of buried pain. George Harrington turned red, opening his mouth to object, but this time the crowd didn't let him speak. Imani stared in shock. She had known Chase was cruel, but she hadn't known he was protected cruel. Untouchable because of the system built around him. Principal Bolton looked crushed. His reputation, his leadership, his entire administration, shaking under the weight of dozens of voices demanding accountability. "For years," a father shouted, "you protected this boy while other children suffered." The room roared in agreement. The school's facade, its pride, its prestige, was cracking wide open. Northwood High's reputation wasn't just damaged, it was collapsing, publicly, loudly, and with the fury of a community betrayed. But even as the truth surfaced, danger still lingered. Because while Chase's actions were exposed, Aaliyah still faced legal consequences for the fire, and the fight for justice was far from over. The small community law office smelled faintly of old paper, coffee, and the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting battles too big for the budget on hand. The walls were lined with mismatched bookshelves, case files stacked in precarious towers, and a faded poster about justice for all taped crookedly near the door. Aaliyah Reeves sat rigidly on a worn leather chair, hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Across from her, Imani sat with her shoulders folded inward, fingers picking at the frayed edge of her sleeve, afraid to meet her mother's eyes. Between them, Mr. Keaton, the community lawyer assigned to the case, sifted through papers with a troubled expression. "Mrs. Reeves," he said finally, removing his glasses, "I need to be honest with you. Setting a car on fire, especially on school property, puts you at real risk of jail time." Imani flinched as if someone had slapped her. Aaliyah inhaled slowly. She had known this was coming. The law didn't bend for emotion, no matter how justified. Still, hearing it aloud made her stomach twist. Mr. Keaton continued, "The only thing working in your favor is the context, the bullying, the inaction from the school, the emotional distress. But the prosecution may still push for charges." Imani's voice cracked. "So my mom might go to prison because of me?" Aaliyah turned to her daughter faster than Keaton could react. "No." Her voice was firm, but her eyes wavered. "No, baby. Look at me." Imani lifted her gaze slowly, tears already forming. "It's my fault," Imani whispered. "If I hadn't gone to that school, if I hadn't ridden that stupid bike, if I—" Aaliyah leaned forward, cupping her daughter's face with trembling hands. For the first time since the fire, her own tears spilled over. "Imani," her voice broke, raw and unfiltered, "this is not your fault, not one piece of it. I did what I did because I only have one child. I only have you, and when I saw you broken on that pavement, I snapped." Imani cried harder, burying her face in her mother's hands. Aaliyah held her close, rocking slightly, as if trying to shield her from everything that had already happened, and everything still coming. The room fell silent for a long moment. Mr. Keaton, normally stoic, looked away to give them a sliver of privacy. After several seconds, he cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Reeves, I admire your honesty and your love for your daughter, but emotion won't save us in court. We need strategy." Aaliyah wiped her cheeks. "What kind of strategy?" Keaton leaned forward, lowering his voice. "The Harrington family wields influence, money, reputation, political ties. They'll try to bury this, to paint you as irrational and violent, to erase the context." Imani shuddered. Keaton continued, "If we go into court with what we have now, we're playing defense, and defense alone won't be enough." He reached into a folder and pulled out a printed screenshot of the viral live stream. "This video is strong, but it can be dismissed as incomplete, emotional, lacking full perspective." Aaliyah frowned. "Incomplete? It shows Chase bullying her." "It shows one incident," Keaton corrected softly, "but not the pattern, not the threats, not the school's negligence in totality." He tapped the papers on his desk. "What we need," he said quietly, "is something stronger. A piece of evidence that doesn't just defend you, but undermines the Harringtons completely." Aaliyah stiffened. "Like what?" Keaton's eyes darkened with calculation. "A recording, a confession, proof of repeated bullying, intent, manipulation, something that exposes Chase as a pattern, not a moment." Imani blinked. "Does that even exist?" Keaton paused. Then, with the calm certainty of someone who had just identified a turning point, he said, "We need a witness, someone who saw everything, someone who recorded it, someone who isn't afraid to come forward." Aaliyah and Imani exchanged glances, and then Keaton added, "Someone like the boy who tried to intervene." Imani whispered, "Lucas." Mr. Keaton leaned back, folding his hands. "If he has what I think he has, it could bring the entire Harrington empire crashing down." And somewhere across town, Lucas Myers, the quiet kid with the trembling hands and the hidden recording, felt the weight of the moment creeping toward him. The basketball court behind Northwood High was always eerily quiet after hours, just the rustle of wind through the torn net, the dull clunk of loose metal on the hoops, and the fading echoes of the day's chaos. Lucas Myers stood near the edge of the court, shifting from foot to foot, clutching his phone so tightly his knuckles turned pale. He looked like he'd rehearsed leaving 1,000 times, but forced himself to stay. Across the asphalt, Imani approached slowly. Even under the dim evening light, she looked fragile, eyes swollen, shoulders hunched, but there was something steadier beneath the surface, a quiet resilience. "Lucas," she called softly. He swallowed hard. I needed to talk to you." They met halfway across the court, an awkward distance between them, like both were afraid to step too close to the truth about to unfold. Lucas cleared his throat. I recorded everything that morning, from the gate to the parking lot." He lifted his phone slightly. I didn't mean to get involved, but I couldn't not press record. Imani's breath hitched. You have the whole thing? He nodded, eyes darting away. The insults, the bike, even the part where he bragged about doing it before. His voice cracked. Chase, he says stuff like that all the time, like hurting people is some kind of game. Imani took a step closer. Lucas, this could help my mom. It could help the whole case. The guilt hit him instantly. He shifted back. I know, and I want to help. I do. But what? My dad, Lucas whispered. He works for Mr. Harrington. If I get involved, Chase won't just come after me. His father will come after my dad. We could lose everything. Imani's face softened. She didn't plead. She didn't push. She didn't guilt him. Instead, she said quietly, Lucas, whatever you choose, I won't blame you. He looked at her, startled by her kindness when she had every right to demand justice. You don't deserve what happened, he murmured. Neither do you, she replied. Chase has been hurting people for years. We just didn't know how deep it went. Lucas exhaled shakily. I'm scared, Imani. Really scared. She nodded. I know. For a moment, it seemed like Lucas might gather the courage to hand the phone over. His fingers even hovered above the screen. But then, footsteps. Heavy. Fast. Angry. Lucas froze. Imani's eyes widened. Chase Harrington emerged from behind the bleachers like a shadow turning solid, jaw clenched, fists balled. Well, isn't this cute? He snarled. The freak and the snitch having a little meeting? Lucas stumbled backward. Chase, I wasn't. Save it, Chase growled, grabbing Lucas by the collar and slamming him against the fence. The clang echoed across the court. You think I don't notice you sneaking around, watching, recording? I didn't. Chase, please. Chase shoved him again. You think I won't crush you the same way I crushed her bike? Imani stepped forward. Stop! Leave him alone! Chase smirked. Or what? Before anyone could move, Lucas's phone slipped from his grip and hit the ground. And then a voice spilled out of the speaker. Chase's voice. Laughing, bragging, admitting everything. Yeah, I trashed her bike. It's hilarious. She cries every time. The color drained from Chase's face. His own confession filled the court in looping clarity. Lucas stared in horror. Imani stared in shock. Chase stared in fear. He lunged toward the phone, but not fast enough. He knew. They knew. Everyone would know. His voice shaking with fury, Chase leaned in close to Lucas's ear and spat. If you make this public, I'll destroy your whole family. His threat echoed across the empty court like a curse. But Chase didn't realize someone else had been close enough to hear every word. The town courthouse wasn't grand or elegant. It was small, old, and carried the scent of aging wood and paper. Yet today, it pulsed with tension sharp enough to rattle the air. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters lined the back wall. Parents from Northwood whispered anxiously, clutching phones, still buzzing with updates. At the center of it all sat Aaliyah Reeves, wrists clenched tightly in her lap, jaw locked in controlled fear. Beside her, Imani sat with trembling hands, staring at the courtroom floor as if willing it not to swallow her whole. Across the aisle, Chase Harrington and his father sat in polished confidence. Chase's bruised ego was hidden behind an expensive suit and a forced mask of innocence. George Harrington whispered occasionally into the ear of their sharply dressed attorney, a man who looked like he charged by the breath. At the front, Judge Ortiz entered, stern, composed, the kind of man who did not tolerate theatrics. The courtroom rose, then settled. Court is now in session, he announced. The prosecutor stood immediately. Your Honor, we are here today to address the arson committed by Mrs. Aaliyah Reeves. The state intends to prove she acted recklessly, endangering students and staff, and causing severe property damage. Chase's attorney rose next, stepping dramatically toward the center. Your Honor, beyond the facts, we intend to show that Mrs. Reeves has displayed dangerous emotional instability. Her actions were not those of a rational adult, but of someone out of control. Someone who posed a direct threat to my client. His lips tightened. Imani's breath shook. The lawyer continued, gesturing at Chase like he were a fragile victim. This young man has suffered emotional trauma from watching his car burn. He fears retaliation. Mrs. Reeves must be temporarily detained for the safety of the community. That's not true, Imani whispered under her breath. The prosecution pressed on. Given the evidence, we request immediate remand. Judge Ortiz lifted a hand. Mrs. Reeves's counsel will respond shortly. For now, let us proceed with the state's argument. As the prosecutor spoke, weaving a narrative that painted Aaliyah as a threat rather than a protective mother pushed to a breaking point, Imani's heart pounded louder and louder. She felt powerless, like the courtroom itself was suffocating her. The judge exhaled, rubbing at his brow. This is a serious matter. Given the gravity of the charges, he looked toward the bailiff. I am prepared to order temporary custody until... A voice cut through the room like a blade. Wait! Everyone turned. The gallery parted as a figure stepped through the doorway, breathless, terrified, but determined. Lucas Myers. He clutched a small silver USB drive so tightly his knuckles were trembling. His voice cracked, but he forced it out anyway. Your Honor, I have evidence. A gasp rippled across the courtroom. Chase stiffened. George's face drained of color. Aaliyah's eyes widened with hope and disbelief. Imani covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Lucas stepped forward, holding out the USB like it was a lifeline. It's everything, he said, louder now. The bullying, the destruction, the threats, the teacher ignoring it. All of it. Judge Ortiz leaned forward. Interest sharpened. Approach the bench. Chase lurched to his feet. He's lying. He manipulated. Sit down, the judge snapped. Chase froze. Lucas walked toward the judge, each step steadying his courage. As he placed the USB in the bailiff's hand, the courtroom held its breath, because whatever truth lived inside that drive was about to flip the entire case upside down, and in the next few minutes, the balance of power in that courtroom and the town would shift in ways none of them expected. The courtroom lights felt harsher now, brighter, as if they too leaned in to witness what would happen next. The bailiff carried the USB to the clerk, who inserted it into the courtroom's aging computer. A hush rolled through the room, tense and sharp. Judge Ortiz adjusted his glasses. Play the file. A single click echoed. Then the speakers crackled to life. First came the sound of footsteps, then Chase's voice, clear, arrogant, unmistakable. Watch this! I'm gonna wreck her bike again. She cries every time. Laughter followed. You should see her face. It's hilarious. People like her don't belong here anyway. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Then another clip played. Chase. Don't film me. Film her. Show everyone how pathetic she is. A second voice. Dude, it's messed up. Chase. Don't care. Daddy fixes everything. Parents in the gallery exchanged horrified whispers. The next audio hit even harder. Imani crying. Metal crunching. Chase. Trash girl, trash bike. Perfect match. Then the most damning recording of all, the one captured behind the basketball court. Lucas's trembling voice. I have everything recorded. A loud shove. Chase. You make this public, I'll destroy your whole family. The room erupted into outrage until Judge Ortiz slammed his gavel. Order! Order in the court! Silence fell like a hammer. Aaliyah squeezed Imani's hand, tears welling, not from fear this time, but from vindication. Lucas stood small but unbroken near the witness bench, though his hands still shook slightly. He had handed over the one piece of evidence no one could twist or bury. Judge Ortiz turned slowly toward Chase Harrington. His voice was firm, cutting the air with the precision of a blade. Mr. Harrington, he said, do you have anything to say in your defense? The courtroom held its breath. Chase opened his mouth, then closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. For the first time, Chase Harrington had no arrogance to fall back on, no smirk, no confidence, just silence, and the weight of his own words echoing through the speakers. His father leaned toward him, whispering urgently, "Say something," but Chase's face was drained of color. He knew there was no talking his way out. Judge Ortiz sighed, the disappointment evident. "Your silence speaks volumes." He shuffled papers, then looked toward Aaliyah. "Mrs. Reeves, while your actions were indeed dangerous, the court acknowledges clear provocation, repeated harassment, and a systemic failure to protect your daughter." A murmur spread across the room, shock mixed with approval. "Therefore," the judge continued, "your charges will be reduced. You will be released pending further review with mandatory community supervision." Imani let out a soft cry of relief. Aaliyah covered her mouth, tears slipping free. She wasn't completely cleared, but she wasn't going to jail today. Hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in days, flickered back into existence. Judge Ortiz added sharply, "As for Northwood High, the evidence suggests severe negligence and potential misconduct. This will be forwarded to the district superintendent immediately." Gasps snapped through the gallery. Chase lowered his head. His father clenched his jaw, visibly rattled. Aaliyah stepped out of the defendant's seat, free for now, while the once untouchable Harrington family sat in stunned silence. The power dynamic flipped in a single afternoon, but as the courtroom emptied, one truth remained. Northwood High was drowning in scandal, and the fallout was only beginning. The Northwood High auditorium had seen pep rallies, award ceremonies, and school plays, but never anything like this. Every seat was filled. Parents lined the walls, murmuring angrily. Reporters hovered near the exits, cameras in hand. The atmosphere pulsed like an exposed nerve. At the front sat the school board supervisors, flanked by attorneys and district officials. Beside them, pale and shaken, sat Principal Bolton, who couldn't stop tugging at his tie. Further down the row, Miss Landon kept her head low, eyes fixed on the floor as if hoping invisibility could save her. And together, in the center aisle, sat Aaliyah and Imani Reeves, drawing whispers from every corner of the room. A board member cleared her throat. "We are here to address the escalating crisis at Northwood High. The evidence presented to the court and public demonstrates severe failures in supervision and the enforcement of anti-bullying policies." A wave of mutters swept through the room. She continued, "Effective immediately. Principal Bolton is suspended pending investigation." Bolton's shoulders collapsed. The room erupted, not in protest, but in relieved outrage. A second supervisor added, "Teacher Caroline Landon will undergo a formal misconduct review for failing to intervene in a documented case of harassment." Gasps echoed, and several parents clapped sharply. "And," the man concluded, "Northwood High's anti-bullying system will be fully restructured with external oversight and mandatory staff retraining." But the tension didn't break. If anything, it grew heavier. A father stood. "These changes are good, but they're late. Kids have been suffering for years while you protected the bullies." Another parent added, "The Harrington boy tormented half this school, and you let him." The auditorium swelled with outrage. Imani shrank slightly under the weight of so many eyes, some sympathetic, some ashamed they hadn't helped sooner. Aaliyah placed a steadying hand on her daughter's arm, then rose from her seat. Her presence quieted the room faster than a gavel. She didn't shout. She didn't grandstand. She just spoke, with fire under every syllable. "Don't blame the flames for what you ignored." Silence rippled outward like a shockwave. Aaliyah stepped forward. "Everyone keeps talking about the fire, the parking lot, the car." She shook her head. "That was a reaction, not the cause." Board members shifted anxiously. Aaliyah pointed toward the crowd, not accusing the parents, but the system behind them. "You want to fix this school? Don't start with my daughter. Don't start with me. Start with the culture that let a child be humiliated in broad daylight while hundreds watched." A few gasps. No one looked away. Ask why teachers turned their backs. Ask why administrators protected the powerful. Ask why a boy like Chase believed he was untouchable. Her voice hardened. Fires don't start on their own. Something fuels them. Something feeds them. And if you don't deal with the source, they will burn again. The hall went absolutely still. Even the supervisors looked stunned, pinned beneath the truth laid bare. Parents exchanged glances. Some ashamed, some inspired, all awakened. Imani looked up at her mother with a mixture of awe and relief. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. No applause followed, just a silence so complete it felt like the entire auditorium was holding its breath, confronted by the truth they had avoided for years. But while the school now faced its reckoning, one last battle remained. The final chapter of Aliyah's legal case was waiting at the courthouse. A month of investigations, hearings, and public outrage had led to this moment, the final day in court. The small-town courtroom was once again packed, but this time the atmosphere was different. Sharper, heavier. No one came to watch a spectacle. They came to witness a reckoning. Judge Ortiz entered with the same measured steps as before, but even he looked changed. Tired, maybe, or burdened by the weight of the case that had pulled the entire town into its center. On one side of the aisle sat Aliyah Reeves, shoulders squared, hands folded, her daughter Imani beside her like a steady heartbeat. Aliyah wore no makeup, no jewelry, only the quiet dignity of someone who had endured more than the court could ever document. On the other side sat Chase Harrington, pale and stiff, suit jacket wrinkled where his hands anxiously clenched the fabric. He stared down, avoiding the eyes of the crowd. His father, George, sat rigidly beside him, jaw tight, mask of control cracking at the edges. Judge Ortiz took his seat. Court is in session. The room held its breath. After reviewing a thick stack of papers, he began. In the matter of State versus Reeves, he said, voice steady, this court acknowledges the serious nature of the defendant's actions. However, he paused, letting the word anchor itself in the air. We also recognize overwhelming evidence of prolonged harassment, negligence by school staff, and severe emotional provocation. Aliyah closed her eyes briefly. Imani gripped her hand tighter. Therefore, Judge Ortiz continued, the defendant will not face jail time. Instead, she will pay a reduced administrative fine and complete an anger management course. A gasp of relief escaped some members of the gallery. Aliyah exhaled shakily, as if finally releasing a month's worth of tension in one breath. Imani whispered, Mom, but the judge wasn't finished. As for the conduct of Chase Harrington, he said, turning his gaze toward the trembling boy, evidence establishes repeated acts of bullying, property destruction, intimidation, and targeted harassment. Chase's head snapped up, eyes wide. These offenses fall under juvenile jurisdiction. The matter will be transferred to the youth court for appropriate disciplinary measures. The words hit like a blow. Chase's composure shattered. Tears spilled down his cheeks, raw, uncontrolled, unmasked. For the first time, the boy who had tormented so many felt the suffocating weight of accountability. No, please, he stammered, voice cracking. His father grabbed his arm. Chase, stop! But Chase couldn't stop. He sobbed openly now, shoulders shaking, unable to hide behind his last name or the power it once promised. Judge Ortiz continued, furthermore, allegations of administrative cover-up and preferential treatment within the Harrington household and Northwood High will be forwarded to the district attorney's office for investigation. George Harrington stiffened as if struck. Whispers erupted among the parents. Aliyah watched silently, not vengeful, but resolute. She had not come here to see a boy destroyed. She came to see a system finally held accountable. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. This court is adjourned. The room exhaled. Chase collapsed into his father's arms, sobbing. George Harrington stared ahead. No longer the untouchable titan of the school board, just a man watching everything he built crumble. Aaliyah turned to her daughter. Imani's eyes shimmered with relief, disbelief, and hope. Aaliyah squeezed her hand. Imani whispered, voice trembling with triumph, "We won, Mom. We finally won." But the victory didn't end in the courtroom, because 1 month later, Northwood High would face the greatest transformation in its history. 1 month later, Northwood High looked the same from the outside. Same brick walls, same courtyard, same morning sunlight drifting over the steps, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The tension that once haunted the hallways had lifted. The shadows that once hid cruelty had been replaced with something unexpected: accountability, structure, hope. Students gathered in the courtyard for the official announcement. Cameras were mounted on rooftops now, real ones, not the shaky phone screens that once captured humiliation. Posters advertising mental health support lined the walkways. Staff moved differently, alert and attentive, as if the past month had forced them to relearn how to be protectors. Imani Reeves stood with her mother, Aaliyah, near the front. The breeze tugged at Imani's braids, and for once she didn't shrink or lower her gaze. She stood tall, shoulders back, not defiant, but grounded, like someone who had finally found the ground beneath her feet. A new principal stepped onto the outdoor stage. Principal Marquez, a former youth advocate known for rebuilding broken school environments. She took the microphone with quiet authority. "Today," she began, "Northwood High turns a page. We cannot undo the harm caused here, but we can ensure it never happens again." The crowd nodded, some solemn, some relieved. "We're implementing a zero-tolerance anti-bullying policy," she continued. "Every staff member will undergo bystander intervention training. Mental health counselors will be available every day, and new security cameras, already installed, will ensure that what happened to Imani and to so many others will never go unseen again." Applause broke out, firm, lasting, genuine. Aaliyah squeezed her daughter's hand. Imani exhaled quietly, letting that applause wash over her like cleansing rain. "And lastly," Principal Marquez said with a smile, "the school would like to recognize a student whose resilience sparked a movement for change. Imani Reeves, please come forward." Gasps rose from the crowd. Imani froze. "Go," Aaliyah whispered, voice trembling with pride. Imani stepped toward the stage, heart pounding. Students parted for her as she walked, some smiling, some ashamed, some simply watching the girl whose story had forced them all to confront themselves. Principal Marquez handed her a certificate. "For extraordinary courage and perseverance," she announced, "Northwood awards you an internal scholarship to support your studies and future goals." Imani blinked as the auditorium erupted in applause. She had never imagined her name would be spoken through speakers for anything other than attendance. She stepped back into the crowd, only to face the Maple Queens. The girls who once recorded her humiliation now stood with their heads bowed, guilt written across their faces. One of them spoke softly. "Imani, we're sorry for recording you, for laughing, for not helping." Imani studied them, not with bitterness, but with clarity. "I don't need your friendship," she said gently but firmly, "just your respect." The girls nodded, tears forming, and stepped aside. Aaliyah met her daughter in the middle of the courtyard. "You changed this school," she whispered. "Do you know that?" Imani looked around, at the students, the banners, the cameras, the new principal, the sunlight filling the courtyard. For the first time, Northwood didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a beginning, and as she walked through the courtyard, no longer the poor girl who had once been humiliated, but the survivor who forced an entire system to change, Imani Reeves realized something powerful. She hadn't just endured Northwood High. She had transformed it. And that's how a broken bicycle exposed an entire system. How one mother's fury forced a school, a family, and a whole town to finally face the truth they'd been avoiding. Justice didn't come quietly. It came in flames, in courtrooms, and in the courage of a girl who refused to stay small. But now I want to hear from you. What part of this story shocked you the most, and why? If this video hit you the way it hit us, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because the next story is coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next.